Hey everyone, Tom Harrison here in what I call my sacred creation space, otherwise known as a shop. Some of you may know already I'm a woodworker, probably better described a bamboo worker. I have a business called Alter Eco and we build beautiful bamboo cabinetry. I'm not normally part of the production, but for now I am. Because of COVID and a variety of other circumstances, for the moment, I've gotten involved to some degree, and I really enjoy it. It's fun. It's great to be creative again. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the production process. Don't want to be doing it all the time, mind you, but it's kind of nice to come back to it for a little while. Got to do some juggling between other enterprises. But hey, that's part of being an entrepreneur, part of being in business. But as I was working today and doing a relatively simple task, sometimes you do these tasks that are relatively mundane, but they can be really enjoyable because you can just kind of get into the flow of it and do it for a while. And it's a way to really calm your mind and just be in this nice pace, this nice rhythm, as many of us would like to have in our speech. Frequently, consistently, regularly, right? So I wasn't going to say this, but it just dawned on me that that's something to consider, right? If to have a hobby, something you do, maybe you already have it in your business, maybe it's driving you crazy because you're doing something mundane all the time. But even if you are, take advantage of those activities where it might seem, oh my gosh, it's getting so boring, it's so mundane, it's just repetitive. Take advantage of that to feel into the rhythm, feel into the flow, feel into the creativity, maybe not of the task, but of how you can be creative with that flow, with that moment. So for example, today, as I was in this flow with this particular task, which, like I said, for me has been enjoyable because I'm not doing it all the time now. If I was doing it every single day, I'd be like, oh, get me out of here. But I'm not. So it was kind of fun to come back to it and get into a flow. And one of the things I love about being in the shop is you see something come out of it, right? You produce something, something's created. So let me back up for a second. I was getting ready to say that for me today, I was part of my creativity in that moment. Now, actually, I'm actually creating something, right? So I'm actually making some parts for what's going to be a bamboo cabinet. So I am creating something. At the same time, I was listening to Michael Williams, and I was listening to one of his audios. Actually, I think it was a video, but of course I'm listening, not watching, because it'd be really difficult and really a bad idea to be doing woodwork or any kind of work and actually watching a video at the same time. That's called multitasking. Doesn't work, especially when those tasks are diametrically, can I say that? Diametrically opposed. They do not support one another. However, listening when I'm doing something that didn't require a lot of thought, right? I knew what I was doing. I was just in the process. I was actually mostly sanding some parts. I just had my headphones on and just listening to the audios. And it worked really nicely because I was in my flow in my work. Now, if I had to do some precise work or detail work, I clearly wouldn't be able to listen intently to the audio. But for this, I was. And in a way, that's a way of being creative. So that's something to think about. Is there something that you do maybe as a hobby or whatever, like mowing the lawn, right? Or washing the dishes, any kind of cleaning activity, any kind of activity, or maybe it is something at work. Anything where it's basically done by rote. It's essentially automatic. You don't need to think about it. You can pay enough attention to get it done. Kind of like when we're listening to the radio, when driving, right? We're paying attention to the road, but we're also conditioned enough that we can listen to something and still drive without hitting anything, right? So think about that in your own life, in your own activities. what can you do, or what are you doing that's a mundane, simple, basically automatic task? We talk about automaticity in Pro90D. What's an automatic task you're doing where you can bring creativity to it and enhance the moment by listening to the audios? Now, Michael talks about this, but there's another level to this. As I was doing that today and listening to the audio, the particular audio I was listening to was talking about transitional words. Words we use between things we say, maybe it's an introductory word we use instead of perhaps a word that we might get stuck on, right? I use right a lot. In fact, I realized recently I use it way too much. In fact, I'll be perfectly honest. I did a version of this video a few minutes ago, and I noticed I was saying right like every 3 seconds. It's like, holy crap, I've got to pay attention to this. So this was the right audio to be listening to today. Now that's an appropriate use of the word. Right? What I thought about as I was listening to this, and you know what, maybe I should blame the audio because it's giving me all these words. So now I'm thinking about it, except I can't really blame the audio because I don't think he even used the word right. He was using and like. And Michael was pointing out how like, for example, is often way overused. And it doesn't sound super intelligent. Unfortunately, it's used a lot, which reflects on the lack of intelligence largely in this country, America, which there's a lot of lack of intelligence right now, whether they say like or not. That's a whole nother thing. But you get it, right? There's many words just used right, which is habitual. I just used the word right, and that was habit. That time, and I was getting ready to use it again. It's so easy, right? We get these words that become kind of part of our lexicon that are so easy to use, and it's probably a good idea for me, to notice those, to be more attentive of what I'm saying, notice those words that have crept in there and become habit so that I can begin to override them. So I'm not overstating it. So I'd love to know if I end up saying right like 1,000 times in this video and I don't even realize it, let me know. I think I've caught all of them so far. So now there's one that's useful that I don't think I overuse. Michael talks about it. So, my name is Tom. So, what do you think about this? And today, let's do this. Right, so these words, when we think about it, yes, they're tools to help us in our speech in the moment. And we can think of it as a creative approach to speech. Right, so this is really the message I'm going to get across right now in this video. The fact that all these tools and techniques, which as you know, well, maybe you don't know yet because it depends on where you are in the program. But ideally, ultimately, we want to get to a place where we don't need to focus on tools and techniques, right? Because if we're doing that all the time, we can only go so far, right? If we're having to constantly think of, okay, what tool and technique do I use now? Now, some of you geniuses out there, your minds are like that, and you can just drop the tool and technique in when you want. I'm relatively good at that in the shop, depending on what I'm building, right? I can pick out the right tool and get to it real quick. With speech, if I had to be thinking of all the different tools and techniques to get through a sentence, right, or get through a presentation, wow, that gets difficult. Now, we ask you to essentially do that early on, especially if your speech is more severe, right? It all depends, right? There's all these different tools and techniques. Most of us don't need to use all of them. In fact, I doubt there's anyone who really needs to use every technique. But part of the beauty is having a lot of tools and techniques so that there's lots of options. And that can get clunky, right? So ultimately, on the path of smooth speech, we want to create a new speaking identity, right? And we want to be modeling, and we want to essentially be embedding a variety of these tools and techniques to where they become automatic, right? It just becomes integrated. And that all comes with practice. In the meantime, as we are needing to consciously use the tools and techniques, the one I'm speaking about now are these transitional words, these introductory words, we can think of it as a creative endeavor. And now maybe that doesn't mean anything to you, but to me, it makes it much more interesting if it's creative. Like, for example, my work here in the shop. I'm not real big on just making the same thing over and over and over. Now, I talked about today how some of these processes are the same that you have to repeat. And if I was doing it every day, I wouldn't want to be doing it. I feel for the employees who need to do that all the time. I mean, really, I do try to mix it up for people so that it's not so monotonous. However, the end product is creative. And even though there's kind of a look and feel to what we do, it's custom work. We do a lot of specialized things, and there's some really interesting aspects to it. It is creative. We're creating something, and it's a creative process, right? Which makes it more interesting. And the more interested we are in our speech, the better. So why not make it creative? And so we think about creative for a moment in terms of these introductory and transitional words. What makes that so creative? What's creative about like, or and, or or so, or well, or right, or any number of potential transitional or introductory words? They don't sound very creative. They've been around for a long time. No, it's not about the word itself. It's about how we use them. So I was mentioning a little while ago that I have noticed I tend to use the word right probably way too many times than is actually right. So it would be helpful for me to be mindful of that and try to override that habit. So there's a couple of things going on here. On the one hand, if there's a word I can really use for transition, it'd be great to choose a different one. So I'm not always using right. Like so. Could use so, well, and. I'd like to not use so much. That's another one that comes up from time to time habitually. Hopefully not too much. I'm pretty sure. I think I replaced most of them with right, which I think sounds a little better. But so there's a couple of things going on. One is being mindful of the habitual words we use that we might want to mix up a little bit. And so it's creative to mix it up. If we notice, oh, wow, I use like all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like. Hey, what if I threw in a few other words and just started using those consciously? Maybe use so and well and etc. So that, one, I begin to override the old habit, right? As you know, we have to do the new thing in order to let go of the old thing, and we have to do a lot of the new thing. And in the moment, in the particular conversation, in the particular moment of speech, it's going to be really helpful because I'm not driving other people crazy with pummeling with them with this same transition word, right? And it's going to help me be more creative moving forward in my speech because I'm getting used to dancing with my speech, right? There's the right again. I'm intentionally bringing other words in so that I can have more dynamism, so that it's more interesting, so that my speech can be, more enriching, more engaging. What do you think? What do you think? What can you do? Play with it, right? It's something we can play with. And in the process of playing with these different transitional and introductory words, one, we might discover, it's going to be really helpful here, right? We can play with the idea of, where is it that I have a problem? Do I ever have a problem? Do I get stuck? Do I stutter? Do I stammer when I start out with certain words? Well, that's a great place to bring in these introductory words. Are there places where maybe I need more space, more time between things I say? That's a great place to bring in transitional words so that I'm not just racing from one word to the next, for example. Think about it for yourself. And also see if you can assess. And I think a lot of this will happen. They can all happen together. You can be doing all of these things at once, what I've just talked about, as well as assessing, wow, what are the words I'm using now that I'm simply using too frequently, right? Pay attention to how you speak, to what transitional and introductory words you use now, intentionally and unintentionally. Which ones would you like to replace or at least reduce somewhat? I don't need to eliminate the word right, but I certainly would like it to be a word that I use more consciously, that isn't just automatically coming up in place of something else or just to fill the space, or as kind of maybe what's something that started as a technique or a tactic and now has become a habit. So this is something, I'll wrap up with this, something to be mindful of. If we're not careful, some of these techniques, people call it tricks and tips, to be more accurate, their techniques and strategies can be great, and remember, they can become habits too. So we want to be careful what we choose to make a new habit, right? So for example, we're like, oh, I'm so tired of saying or like or right, so I'm just going to replace it with some other word. And then you might find that you're stuck with some other word that you can't get rid of or is difficult to get rid of, right? So be mindful of that. All of it, when you think about it, is a creative process. And that, I think, makes it fun. There's a reason I changed the name of my shop for myself to Sacred Creation Space. Take care. Have an awesome journey introducing and transitioning in your speech. And if you haven't done it yet, join Pro 90D. We need you. Right? Yeah, we do. See ya.